one board at a time, one nail at a time. I just took a vision that I had. Nobody told me I couldn't do it because I didn't even tell anybody what I was doing. I just started doing it.
For decades, Eustace Conway was just the guy from the mountains. He lived simply. He rejected the modern world. But when the government raided his land, they weren't looking for building code violations. They were looking for an entrance. Rumors in the Appalachian hills speak of ancient tunnels that lead deep into the crust of the earth. When search teams finally breached the hidden door on his property, they didn't find a root cellar. They found a path to the impossible. What was he guarding down there? And why did the feds want to shut it down so fast? But here's the catch. The real reason for the raid. Everyone knows Eustace Conway. He is the man who walked away from society. He lives on a massive piece of land called Turtle Island in the mountains of North Carolina. For years, he has been a symbol of freedom. He teaches people how to build fires. He teaches them how to grow food. He lives in a way that makes the modern world look weak. But then the modern world struck back. The government showed up at his gate. They did not come alone. They came in a pack. They brought inspectors. They brought law enforcement. They brought a list of demands that was thicker than a phone book. They claimed his buildings were not up to code. They said his way of life was dangerous. They threatened to shut down his school and bulldoze his cabins. To the average person watching the news, it looked like a simple legal fight. It looked like bureaucrats picking on a free spirit. But here is the catch. People who live in those mountains know better. You do not send a massive team of federal and state agents just for an outhouse or a barn. The response was too big, it was too aggressive, it felt like a military operation. Locals started whispering. They said the government was not looking at the buildings above the ground. They were looking at the ground itself. Turtle Island sits on a very specific spot. Geologists know that the Blue Ridge Mountains are some of the oldest on the planet. They are filled with quartz. They are filled with magnetic anomalies. Some people believe these mountains sit on powerful energy lines called ley lines. If you control this land, you control that energy. It is not that simple, though. Eustace is a smart man. He knows the history of the land. He knows the legends. For 20 years, he had been digging. He had been moving earth. He said he was building a cellar. He said he was fixing the drainage, but the amount of dirt he moved was massive. It was enough to fill a stadium. Where did it all come from? If he was just building a small basement, he wouldn't need to move a mountain. The government had satellite images. They saw the changes in the terrain. They saw the heat signatures. The officials suspected he was building a compound, a fortress. But why? Was he expecting a war? Or did he find something that was already there? There are stories in North Carolina of old mines that go down for miles. Not coal mines, gold mines, and even stranger mines that produce metals we don't use anymore. If Eustace found an entrance to an ancient network, he would keep it quiet. He would claim it. And that is exactly what the government fears. They fear a citizen who has something they don't. The raid happened right when his fame was peaking. Millions of people were watching him on TV. This gave the government a cover. They could say they were just protecting the public because of his visibility. But the timing was suspicious. It felt like they needed to get in there before he revealed something. They shut down the access roads. They cleared the students off the property. They wanted the land empty. They wanted silence. And get this, the inspectors were not just using tape measures, they were using ground-penetrating radar. They were using sonic devices. These are tools you use when you are looking for voids, when you are looking for bunkers. They spent days walking the perimeter of the property, far away from the main house. They were hunting for a back door. They were hunting for ventilation shafts. The vibe on the property was terrifying. Eustace was fighting for his life in court, but the real battle was in the woods. He knew what they were looking for. He knew that if they found the entrance, he would lose everything. Not just his land, but the secret he had been guarding. The Blue Ridge Mountains have a history of people disappearing. Entire settlements have vanished here. The terrain is rugged. It is easy to hide. But technology makes it harder. The government has a history of seizing land for national security. They have done it in Nevada. They have done it in Virginia. If Turtle Island sits on top of a strategic geological feature, they would want it. Maybe it is a massive deposit of rare earth minerals. Maybe it is a stable cavern system perfect for a fallout shelter. Or maybe it is something supernatural. There are theories that the government monitors high strangeness areas, areas where UFOs are seen, areas where physics acts weird. Turtle Island has always been a place of high energy. Compass needles spin there, radios cut out. If Eustace was sitting on a portal or a vortex, the feds would want to control it. They wouldn't want a survivalist poking it with a stick. The crazy part is that Eustace never flinched. He stood his ground. He looked them in the eye. That is the look of a man who holds the cards. He knew they couldn't just dig up the whole 1,000 acres. They needed to find the specific spot, and he had spent years camouflaging it. He planted briars. He moved rocks. He made the entrance look like just another hillside. But the search teams were relentless. They brought dogs that were trained to smell stale air. They brought experts who could read the shift in the soil. They were closing in. The circle was getting tighter. And as they got closer to the restricted area of the property, the equipment started acting up. The radar screens went fuzzy. The batteries drained instantly. The lead inspector stepped on a patch of grass that echoed like a metal drum. The secret in the soil. The moment the ground echoed, everything stopped. The birds seemed to go quiet. The wind died down. A hollow sound in the middle of a dense forest is not normal. The Blue Ridge Mountains are made of granite and gneiss. They are solid rock. To hear a drum sound means there is a massive empty space right under the grass. The search team looked at each other. They knew they had found it. Yeah, about that, this wasn't just a small hole. The vibration traveled. One of the agents walked 20 feet away and stomped his boot. Boom! The same hollow sound. He walked another 20 feet. Boom! The void was huge. It stretched under the trees for as far as they could test. This was not a root cellar. This was a complex. They started clearing the leaves. The dirt was loose on top, but packed hard underneath. They found a layer of clay that didn't belong there. It was red clay, brought in from the valley to seal the surface. Someone had gone to great lengths to waterproof this ceiling. Why? To keep the rain out, sure, but also to hide the heat. Clay is a good insulator. If there was heat coming from below, the clay would mask it from thermal cameras. Eustace, or whoever built this, was playing a high-level game of hide and seek. The team brought in a heavier drill. They needed to see what was under the clay. As the drill bit went down, it hit something hard. Not rock, metal. But it wasn't steel, it was softer. Maybe copper, maybe lead. This started the wildest theories among the crew. Why would you line an underground room with copper? Copper blocks radio waves. It creates a Faraday cage. This means whatever is inside cannot send a signal out, and signals from the outside cannot get in. And get this, there is a legend in these mountains about the moon-eyed people. The Cherokee tell stories of a race of pale, small people who lived here before the Native Americans. They say these people couldn't see in the sun, so they lived underground. They were master builders. They built stone walls and forts. Some people believe they never left. They just went deeper. Was Eustace connected to this legend? Did he find one of their ancient forts and restore it? The ground-penetrating radar finally got a clear image. The screen showed a long, straight tunnel. It was perfectly straight. Nature does not make straight lines. Water creates curves. Lava creates jagged tubes. Only intelligence creates straight lines. The tunnel was 10 feet wide and 12 feet tall. That is massive. You could drive a truck through it. What most people don't realize is the sheer weight of the mountain above. To keep that tunnel from collapsing, you need engineering skills that rival modern architects. You need arches. You need keystones. The radar showed pillars spaced out evenly. It looked like a temple or a highway. The depth was worrying. It started near the surface but slanted down at a steep angle. It was heading for the bedrock. The officials found a ventilation pipe hidden inside a hollow tree trunk. It was genius camouflage. You could walk past it 1,000 times and never see it. They put a sensor down the pipe. The air quality was perfect. It wasn't stale. It wasn't toxic. It was fresh, cool mountain air. This means there is a circulation system, a system that pushes air miles underground without electric fans. This is lost technology. The ancients knew how to use wind pressure and water currents to move air. We have forgotten how to do that. Basically, the team realized they were standing on top of an engineering marvel, and they felt like intruders. The ground felt charged. Some of the men complained of headaches. Some felt dizzy. High concentrations of quartz and running water can create piezoelectricity. If the tunnel was lined with quartz, it could be generating a massive electrical field. Was that the purpose? Was it a giant battery? The search for the door became frantic. They followed the line of the tunnel up the hill. They found a rock formation that looked natural, but the moss on it was slightly different color. It was younger moss. Someone had moved these rocks recently. The team started pulling them away. Behind the rocks was a wall of timber, giant logs stacked horizontally. It looked like the entrance to an old mine, but stronger. The wood was treated with something that smelled like pine tar and beeswax. It was preserved. There was no rot. This door could last for 100 years. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a smooth surface of wood and iron. The crazy part is that there were symbols burned into the wood. They looked like runes. They looked like the letters you see on Vikings artifacts. There is a theory that Vikings came to Appalachia long before Columbus. They traveled down the rivers. They left markers. Was this a Viking outpost or something even older? The symbols were warning signs. The team photographer snapped pictures, but his camera malfunctioned. The digital image was distorted. The leader of the team ordered them to use a crowbar. They wedged it into the gap. The wood groaned. It sounded like the mountain itself was complaining. They pushed, they pulled. Slowly, the heavy timber gate swung inward. It didn't squeak. It was balanced perfectly on hidden hinges. Darkness poured out. It was a thick, heavy darkness. It felt like the air inside had been waiting for 1,000 years to escape. The smell hit them first. It didn't smell like dirt. It smelled like ozone. It smelled like a thunderstorm. The flashlight beam hit something shiny hanging from the ceiling of the tunnel. What they found inside. The object hanging from the ceiling was a lantern, but it wasn't a normal lantern. It was made of glass and copper, and inside there was a crystal. It wasn't lit, but it caught the reflection of their flashlights and amplified it. The entire hallway lit up for a second with a pale blue glow. The team gasped. It was a trick of the light, or was it? They stepped inside. The floor was stone. Perfectly flat, polished stone. It wasn't concrete. It was granite slabs, fitted so tightly you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. This is called polygonal masonry. You see it in Peru. You see it in Egypt. You do not see it in North Carolina, built by a survivalist with a hammer. This type of construction requires melting the stone or shaping it with sonic tools. It is impossible to do with a chisel. So, here's the deal. If Eustace built this, he is the greatest architect in human history. Or he found it. The theory of the copper culture suggests that thousands of years ago, a massive trade network existed here. They mined copper and built cities. Then they vanished. Maybe they built this. Maybe they used it to hide from a cataclysm. The walls were cool to the touch. They walked deeper. The tunnel was wide. The acoustics were bizarre. Their footsteps didn't echo. The walls seemed to absorb the sound. This is another sign of advanced engineering. If you are hiding, you don't want echoes. You want silence. The team passed side rooms. They looked like cells or storage bays. In one room, they found racks of metal bars. At first, they thought it was gold, but it was lighter. It was aluminum or titanium. Where did he get this, and why? It looked like raw materials for building machines. In another room, there were barrels of water, but the water was glowing faintly. There is a theory about structured water or heavy water found deep underground. Some say it has healing properties. Some say it is fuel. Basically, this place was a fortress of resources. But as they went deeper, the architecture changed. The timber beams disappeared. The walls became solid bedrock, carved out by something that left smooth, circular marks. These look like the marks from a tunnel boring machine, but those machines are the size of trains and cost billions of dollars. How did one get here? Or was this tunnel melted by a heat ray? The theories about ancient technology assert that pre-Ice Age civilizations had directed energy weapons. They used them to cut stone. The marks on the wall matched the descriptions of vitrified forts found in Scotland. The stone had been turned to glass in some spots. The heat required to do that is nuclear. The Geiger counters clicked softly, not dangerous levels, but higher than normal. There was residual radiation here. The team felt a sense of dread. They were miles from the surface now. The tunnel spiraled down. It was designed to confuse direction. If you didn't know the way, you would get lost. They found a fork in the path. One way led to a collapsed section. The other led to a massive pair of double doors. And get this, the collapsed section didn't look accidental. It looked like it was blown up on purpose. Someone wanted to seal off that part of the tunnel. What was down there that was so dangerous it had to be buried? Monsters, viruses, or just a path to the rest of the network? The Hollow Earth theory says that the crust is like a honeycomb. There are highways connecting the continents underground. Maybe the collapsed tunnel was the on-ramp to that highway. The team chose the path with the doors. These doors were made of a black metal. It absorbed the light. It felt cold like ice. There were no handles, just a handprint carved into the center. It was a locking mechanism, but not digital. It was mechanical. You had to press the right spots in the right order. The leader of the search team was an engineer. He looked at the mechanism. He realized it was based on weight and pressure. He pressed the handprint. Nothing happened. Then he pushed harder. A click echoed through the stone. Gears started turning inside the wall. Heavy, stone gears. The sound was deep and grinding. It's not that simple, though. To build a stone gear system that works after centuries is nearly impossible. The friction would destroy it, unless they used a lubricant we don't know about, or unless the stone was frictionless. The doors hissed. A seal was broken. The air pressure equalized. Their ears popped. They pushed the doors open. A gust of warm air hit them. It smelled like flowers, like a jungle. How could it smell like plants this deep underground? The impossibility of it made them dizzy. They were expecting a bunker. They were walking into a biosphere. The crazy part is the feeling of time. Down there, time felt different. It felt slower. Some people say that living underground extends your life because you are shielded from cosmic radiation. Is that why Eustace looked so young for his age? Is that why the ancients lived for hundreds of years? This place was a sanctuary for life. They stepped through the black doors. They were now in the main chamber. It was vast. The ceiling was lost in the shadows. But in the center of the room there was a light source that shouldn't exist. A pillar of crystal in the center of the room was pulsating with a soft, rhythmic heartbeat. The mystery in the dark. The crystal pillar was about 4 feet high. It wasn't plugged into anything. It sat on a stone pedestal. It pulsed with a white light that illuminated the entire cavern. This was zero-point energy, or at least that's what the conspiracy theorists would call it. It is the idea that you can pull energy from the vacuum of space. If this was real, it would put every oil company out of business instantly. It would end the energy crisis. And it was sitting in a basement in North Carolina. The team approached it cautiously. The light didn't cast shadows. It was omnipresent. Around the room there were tables, but they weren't for eating. They were covered in artifacts. There were maps. But these maps showed the world with different coastlines. They showed a land bridge between Europe and America. They showed a massive continent in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. These were maps of the pre-flood world, maps of Atlantis or Mu, and that's putting it lightly. Finding a map like this is one thing. Finding it drawn on a material that feels like plastic but looks like skin is another. It was durable. It was waterproof. The detail was microscopic. You needed a magnifying glass to see the cities. And there were cities marked in places that are now deserts. Cities in the Sahara. Cities in Antarctica. The walls of the chamber were covered in shelves. These shelves held cylinders. The team opened one. Inside was a scroll made of thin copper. It was etched with diagrams of flying machines, diagrams of genetic manipulation, diagrams of the solar system with extra planets. This was a library of the Watcher class, the beings who supposedly taught humanity civilization. The crazy part is the seeds. There was a section of the room that looked like a bank vault. Inside were glass jars filled with seeds, but they were huge. Grains of wheat the size of grapes, corn kernels as big as walnuts. These were the original seeds, the seeds that grew before the soil was depleted, before the atmosphere changed. If you planted these today, you could solve world hunger, or you could destroy the ecosystem. They were alien to our modern world. In the corner, there was a skeleton. It wasn't human, it was humanoid, but it was 8 feet tall. The skull had a double row of teeth. The fingers were too long. This matched the legends of the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Bible, the giants that the Smithsonian supposedly hides. Here was one laid out on a stone slab preserved in amber. It was wearing armor made of copper scales. What most people don't realize is that the cash cow of history is the narrative that we are the peak of civilization. Finding a giant skeleton proves we are small. It proves we are a devolution. That scares the authorities. It destroys the theory of evolution. It destroys the religious narrative. It is a truth too big for the public. The machine in the corner was different from the crystal. It was a series of copper coils and mirrors. It looked like a communication device. It was pointed at a shaft in the ceiling that went straight up to the surface. Was Eustace communicating with something, or was he listening? The device was receiving a signal, a low-frequency hum. The team leader looked at the frequency counter. It was 432 hertz. The miracle tone, the frequency of the universe. But here's the catch. On the desk next to the giant skeleton, there was a journal. This one was written in English. It was dated 1947, the year of Roswell. The handwriting was shaky. It detailed a meeting between government officials and the others. It claimed that the government gave up the rights to the underground in exchange for technology. It claimed that Turtle Island was a designated safe zone agreed upon by a treaty with non-human entities. This changed everything. Eustace wasn't just a squatter, he was a diplomat. He was the warden of the treaty zone. The government raid wasn't an attack, it was a breach of contract. They were breaking the treaty by entering the chamber. The alarm that started ringing wasn't a siren, it was a feeling of pure panic in their chests. The room was defending itself. The air grew heavy. The crystal started pulsing faster. The light turned from white to red. The team realized they had triggered a security system. Not a digital one, but a consciousness one. The room knew they were hostile. The artifact started to vibrate. The copper scrolls rattled. The giant skeleton seemed to shift inside the amber. The fear was primal. They grabbed what they could, the metal box, a few maps, a handful of seeds, and they ran. They ran back up the tunnel. The smooth floor felt like it was tilting, trying to slide them back down into the dark. As they sprinted toward the exit, the heavy stone doors began to close with a bone-crushing slam. The legend continues. They made it out just in time. The doors slammed shut with a force that shook the mountain. The boom was heard in the town miles away. People thought it was an earthquake. The team scrambled out of the timber gate and into the forest. They were gasping for air. They looked back, the gate was gone. Not closed, gone. The rocks had shifted, the moss had covered it. It was like the mountain had swallowed the entrance to protect itself. The metal box they stole was locked. They took it to a secure facility. Rumor has it that inside the box were coordinates to other entrances all over the world. The pyramids, the Vatican, Antarctica. This implies a global network, a breakaway civilization that lives right under our feet. It's not that simple, though. The media never reported on the giant skeleton. They never reported on the crystal. They reported that Eustace had unsafe outbuildings and that the issue was resolved. It was a classic cover-up. They used the mundane to hide the magical. They sanitized the story. They made it boring so people would stop looking. Basically, the preserve is still there. Eustace is still there. He is still teaching survival. But there is a sadness in his eyes now. Or maybe it is a relief. They saw the truth, but they couldn't take it. The mountain rejected them. He is still the guardian. But now the government knows that he has the ultimate leverage. He has the switch to the old world. Everyone's obsessed with aliens coming from the sky. but the raid on Turtle Island suggests they are already here. Or rather, they never left. They are the ant people of the Hopi legends. They are the builders of the tunnels, and they are waiting for us to destroy ourselves so they can come up and reclaim the surface. The crazy part is that we may never know the full truth. The agents who went down there were reassigned. Some retired, some went crazy. They talk about the hum in their sleep. The government classified the land as a historical easement, which restricts digging. They did this to stop Eustace, but also to stop anyone else from finding the door. There is a wild theory that the Earth's magnetic poles are about to flip. When that happens, the surface will be roasted by solar winds. The only safe place will be underground. The crystal chamber wasn't a museum, it was a life support system for the shift. Eustace was preparing the lifeboat, and the government tried to hijack it. He proved that one man connected to the land is more powerful than a bureaucracy. He showed us that history is a lie. The timeline is wrong. We are older and more mysterious than we are told. The raid didn't stop the legend, it confirmed it. The final chamber raised questions that keep the powerful awake at night. Do you believe there are ancient civilizations hiding underground? Or was this just a government cover-up of advanced military tech? Tell us your theory in the comments below. If you want to see more mysteries unearthed, smash that like button and subscribe.